Hi, my name's Bradley Beer. I'm the Managing Director of BMT Tax Depreciation. My background is I started at BMT in 1998. I was at university studying my quantity surveying or construction management degree actually, coming out as a quantity surveyor. And come to do some work experience really at BMT with my then lecturer who's now my business partner. And I was the first staff member in our business. Doing a lot of depreciation schedules right from the start and a bit of traditional quantity surveying to now the Managing Director of our national firm that does depreciation schedules all over the country. There's about 185 staff and we concentrate heavily on depreciation schedules and saving investors some money. Look, I think in general investing into property is something that we really need to get educated about before we buy properties, having some idea of the numbers. Depreciation is one of those numbers that really makes a big difference to the cost of owning that property, and we really should be looking at what these numbers are going to do to our cash flow before we buy a property. I think lack of education is the big reason, and I think that's in general across the property investing board, that often investors don't get as educated about it before they actually go and buy that property. That's probably the biggest reason that we see, probably 70 or 80% of investors don't maximise the deduction, and we usually just help them to make sure they do. Property depreciation is effectively a tax deduction for property investors. When you use a property for investment, it's getting older and wearing out. One day the carpet's going to wear out, and effectively the tax office says that we're able to claim part of the cost of this building on the value of these items as a tax deduction each year. What it means is more cash for property investors because they get to make some non-cash tax deductions against that investment property. Traditionally, a quantity surveyor is someone who measures and estimates construction costs of buildings. So we get plans, specifications and information about a building, and we can measure up how much concrete, how much steel and how much should it cost to build that building in the current market. Now, the reason that a quantity surveyor gets involved in this depreciation is that the claims relate to part of the construction costs, and the ATO says we want someone who knows about construction costs involved in this process. So if you don't have all the costs, the quantity surveyor will estimate the costs and the tax office will accept those estimates. On top of that, knowing the rules from a tax perspective and how to treat the costs of a property to help maximise that deduction is very important. So it's a combination of quantity surveying and also sort of a unique knowledge of the tax rules in relation to depreciation that we need to add together to help maximise those deductions for clients. The importance of claiming depreciation is really down to cash flow. Investing into property is all about making money at some point now and in the future. In the future through growth. That comes down to choosing the right property and things like that. But now, through the time, cash flow. Getting the maximum rent and those sorts of things helps to maximise that cash flow. Making sure you claim all of those tax deductions properly helps to maximise that after-tax cash flow. Depreciation is one of those deductions. We get involved to help to maximise that deduction, and what it means is more cash in the investor's pocket, which is the reason they're investing in property in the first place. Effectively, a depreciation schedule is something that helps you to save a fair bit of tax. It's a report. It looks like a whole bunch of numbers, and a report comes as a PDF these days. You don't even need a hard copy anymore, but it projects out the numbers, and the numbers in it are a total construction cost that we get to claim a certain percentage of, and a value on what we call items of plant and equipment, carpets, hot water services, stoves, blinds, curtains, and the rate at which we get to claim those things. Effectively, it projects out a number for your accountant to put into your tax return each year and get you a little bit more cash flow out of that property. Depreciation on new property versus old property, it's a regular question. So we'll look at new property. When a property is built, it usually costs more to build now than it would have cost to build 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Also, the items in the property are brand new, so they're worth more for the purpose of depreciation. So what that means is that comparable properties, new versus old, the new property gets a bit more in deductions than the older property. Now, old property still gets depreciation. The age of the property does impact on how much. The quality or the condition of the items in the property also hinges or gives an indication of how much it might be. The important thing is that old property still does get depreciation, won't be as much, won't last as long, but there is still some deductions there. New property is where the most is at though, of course. Look, Depreciation and renovators is a very important question. If you renovate a property, there's two things to consider: before you renovate and after you renovate. After you renovate, it's pretty easy. You've added some more things to that property, you've added some more costs to that property, so you add some more things to depreciate. So you want to make sure you depreciate those things, of course. Probably the important one is before you renovate. Before you pull it apart, make sure you've got a depreciation schedule already there, because you're throwing some things away that still had some value left. And whatever value is left on those things for the depreciation purpose can be an instant deduction in that year you throw them away instead of continuing to depreciate. Now, I've done a few renovations, and sometimes this can be $5,000, $10,000 in that year that you do that renovation. So don't throw away your stuff that's worth some value still without making sure you claim it. Quantity surveyor in there first is the answer to that. We talked about old versus new property, and we explained that new property definitely gets some more depreciation, but old property still gets depreciation. Now, renovations done by someone else is one of the reasons that maybe old property still gets some quite reasonable depreciation, because someone else has spent some more money on that property, whether it's 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Money's been spent, there's more things to claim. So even if you didn't do that renovation and you bought this property off someone else who did all the hard work, then there's some depreciation available on that renovation potentially. We go in, we estimate the cost of those things, put values on those things, and you get to claim in relation to those past renovations on that property. With an accountant who advises against the depreciation schedule, I'd probably just ask the question why. Now, maybe because they already have one, maybe because they don't know where to find someone who can actually do one properly. But there's a sort of a fundamental thing about construction costing that takes the risk away from that accountant, that we will make sure that the report that we provide is ATO compliant to help that accountant to get more deductions out of that property. So we actually work alongside that accountant to help them as part of those numbers in that tax return. We're kind of never fighting with the accountant anyway. It's about working alongside, and we're happy to talk to that accountant about why and how we think that depreciation schedule should be done by the quantity surveyor to help with that compliance for the client and for the accountant as well. Look, as a quantity surveyor, we work alongside the accountant. They're my friends. Most of the time, the accountant's saying, get a depreciation schedule as part of your tax return from the specialist quantity surveyor. It's about taking the risk away from that accountant. We are recognised by the tax office to estimate the construction costs for the purpose of depreciation. So we provide a report that's ATO compliant to help to maximise their deductions. We also actually go and visit that property, so that way if there's an audit situation, we've been out there, we've had a look, we've estimated these costs, we've seen these items in that property. So usually, because of the thorough way we do that, we'll end up with more deductions. We'll provide something to the accountant to usually get more deductions because we actually go through it in such detail. Also keeps the risk off him and the risk off you as the investor. The question of whether it's too late to get a depreciation schedule really relates to how long you've owned that property for. If you've been missing out on deductions, you can very easily go back and amend up to 2 years of your tax return. So there could be some cash sitting in that property that you haven't actually been claiming. Because a lot of investors aren't maximising this deduction, you can have a look at what you are claiming and see if there's any more there to get. Now, if the property is 100 years old and you've owned it for 50 years, then it's probably too late to get a depreciation schedule unless you've done a lot of renovations to the property, because you might change it. But in general, it's always worth asking the question to see if there's some more money there for you.